The year is somewhere around 410 AD, though the villagers crouched in their smoky huts don't care for precise dates. Rome has withdrawn its legions, calling them back across the Channel, across the Alps, to defend the empire's own heart from waves of Goths, Vandals, and other groups your Latin teacher probably mispronounced while trying to seem relatable. One day, a cohort of soldiers is stationed at a fort on Hadrian's Wall, and the next, they're gone, marching south, their shields glinting one last time before disappearing, leaving the locals staring after them with the kind of sinking feeling you get when the Wi-Fi goes out right in the middle of a season finale. You'd probably never make it through a single medieval night, but don't worry, I'll guide you safely through. So before we go any further, if this quiet company helps, you can gently tap like and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart, and drop your time and place below, so none of us feel alone tonight. Without the Roman army, Britain feels exposed, and for good reason. Raiders come like mosquitoes to a garden party. Picts from the north, Irish from across the sea, Saxons from the misty east. The towns, once alive with Roman order, begin to shrivel. Imagine stone streets sprouting weeds, basilicas echoing with nothing but pigeons, amphitheatres collapsing into sheep pastures. It's like watching your neighbourhood shopping mall turn into an eerily quiet, haunted landmark. Except instead of mole cops on segways, you have wild dogs and desperate families stripping tiles from makeshift roofs. For centuries, Rome had been the scaffolding of life here. Aqueducts carried water, markets buzzed with Mediterranean wine and olive oil, governors issued decrees in Latin that trickled all the way down to farmers. But when that scaffolding collapsed, ordinary people suddenly realized they didn't know how to keep the roof from caving in. It's one thing to enjoy the luxury of hot baths when pipes are humming. It's another to figure out plumbing when your best tool is a rusty hoe and your neighbour still thinks wells are haunted. At first, there's confusion. The local aristocrats, the Romano-British elite, try to hold the line. They write desperate letters to Rome, essentially saying, yeah, hey, love what you're doing with the empire, but could you maybe send back an army before the Saxons redecorate our coastline? The answer, carved into history with all the sympathy of a rejection email, is no. In fact, Rome basically replies with the ancient equivalent of good luck, don't call us, we'll call you. So what was life really like in those first years after Rome's fall? Picture this. You trudge through a countryside littered with silent stone villas. Many still stand, their mosaic floors cracked but recognisable. Little tesserae forming hunting scenes where deer leap forever across faded fields. But the roofs have caved in, the hypocaust heating systems are dead, and in place of perfumed banquets, sheep chew grass where senators once reclined. A farmer leads you past one such ruin, muttering that his grandfather used to work there as a servant. Now he scavenges the broken walls for building stone. The villa, once a symbol of Roman civility, is reduced to an expensive Home Depot for desperate peasants. The countryside is dotted with these fragments of grandeur, but the people pressing on are less interested in marble than in survival. Crops must be sown, even if bandits might reap them. Wolves prowl near the edges of fields, not yet hunted into myth. Farmers wake to the caw of crows, hoping it's not an omen, just birds squabbling over scraps. Life narrows into simple rhythms: sow, reap, guard, repeat. Forget empire. Survival is the new religion. And yet, echoes of Rome linger stubbornly like a catchy song you can't get out of your head. Latin is still spoken in prayers and contracts. Coins, though fewer, still clink in some marketplaces. Old roads cut across the land, though grass and brambles choke them. These roads become metaphors, still there, but cracked, like memories you can't quite bring yourself to delete. People walk them knowing that once, legions marched here with polished sandals and gleaming armour. Now it's just you, your muddy boots, and maybe a sack of turnips. The collapse of central order also means that local warlords start to rise. They might style themselves as protectors, but half the time they're just the biggest bully with a decent sword. Imagine attending a feast in one of their smoky timber halls. The smell of roasting pork fills the air, dogs prowl underfoot, warriors boast about the day's skirmishes while women serve mead in wooden cups. There's laughter, but it's the nervous kind, the laughter of men who know tomorrow's raid could leave them bleeding in a ditch. You sit close to the fire, wondering whether you're a guest or a hostage. Meanwhile, in towns like Londinium, decay accelerates. The bustling Roman city of traders, administrators and temples becomes eerily quiet. Streets once swept daily now stink with refuse. Ivy crawls over abandoned forums. The amphitheatre, which once roared with entertainment, becomes a nesting ground for birds. To walk those streets is to feel like a tourist in your own homeland, watching the past decay in real time. It's less Netflix's Gladiator and more a very slow, depressing episode of Extreme Home Makeover Collapse Edition. Food becomes uncertain. Roman imports, wine from Gaul, olives from Spain, exotic spices disappear. Your dinner is whatever the land coughs up: barley bread, goat cheese, maybe a bit of salted pork if you're lucky. Wine, forget it. You're drinking ale, and not the craft IPA with notes of citrus and coriander, but something closer to watery barley juice that tastes like regret. Still, it gets you through cold nights, so you drink anyway. The sense of isolation deepens. Britain, once a province plugged into the great web of Roman trade, becomes an island adrift. Ships no longer sail regularly from Gaul with goods and gossip. News becomes rumour, and rumour becomes myth. Did Rome really fall? Has the emperor been replaced? Is the world ending? When communication collapses, imagination fills the void. Priests preach warnings of apocalypse. Old druids mutter of gods returning. Farmers shrug and get back to milking cows because someone has to. In the chaos, you see cultural mixing. Some cling desperately to Roman ways, wearing worn-out togas, scrawling Latin prayers on scraps of parchment. Others embrace older, native traditions, rituals at standing stones, offerings in rivers. It's as though the cultural hard drive has fragmented, leaving Britain booting up half Roman, half Celtic, with the occasional Saxon malware already creeping in. And then there's the landscape itself. Without the relentless Roman hand reshaping everything, nature begins to reclaim its throne. Forests creep closer to settlements. Wolves and boars grow bolder. Marshes spread where drainage systems fail. Walking at dusk, you hear owls call from trees that have swallowed old Roman milestones. To you, it feels less like progress and more like slipping backward into a primal wilderness. What's astonishing is how quickly memory fades. Within a generation, children grow up seeing Roman ruins not as what we once were, but as that old pile of rocks. A carved Latin inscription means nothing to a boy chasing pigs across the stones. For him, life is not about empires, but about making it through winter with all his toes intact. The mighty Rome of Cicero and Caesar is reduced to bedtime ghost stories told around smoky fires. Yet resilience flickers here too. In small communities, people adapt. New leaders emerge, often blending Roman titles with Celtic traditions. Farmers learn to defend their own lands, building wooden stockades instead of relying on distant armies. Villages become self-sufficient, producing their own tools, clothing, and food. Life shrinks, but it does not end. Humanity has a way of stubbornly refusing to die out just because the Wi-Fi went down and the aqueduct cracked. That stubbornness, that gritty determination, is what keeps Britain alive in this so-called Dark Age. Imagine yourself walking back to that ruined villa. The moonlight glints on broken mosaics, and for a moment you see both past and present at once. The ghost of a Roman feast overlaying the huddle of a peasant family around their hearth. The grandeur is gone, but the fire still burns, faint but real. The air feels colder now, not just from the winds sweeping across the island, but from the sense that Britain has become a prize left unattended on the kitchen table, and hungry hands are reaching in through every open window. You walk along the broken line of a Roman road, weeds sprouting through the cracks, and in the distance you hear the crash of waves on the eastern coast. Somewhere beyond those waves, sails are rising, carrying men with sharp axes and sharper appetites. The Saxons, the Angles, the Jutes, even Frisians, names that sound like distant tribes in a textbook to you, but in this age they're flesh and blood figures stepping ashore, with shields painted in spirals and beasts, ready to carve new homes out of someone else's misery. The first arrivals are almost casual, little groups testing the waters, raiding villages for cattle, grain, and women. They land on muddy beaches, their shallow boats sliding easily up river mouths, and the locals scatter like pigeons when a carriage rattles into the square. These raiders are not empire builders at first. They are opportunists, probing, taking what they can, retreating before anyone can mount a real defence. For the Romano-British farmers who witness it, the sight is terrifying. Strange men with strange tongues pouring into their huts, grabbing everything of value and vanishing back to the surf before a warlord can gather his men. But the raiding doesn't stay occasional. Imagine being in a coastal village, listening at night to the waves, half comforted, half terrified, because you never know if those waves carry silence or ships. Dogs bark, women clutch children, and every creak in the darkness sounds like an oar striking water. In the morning you might find black smoke rising 3 villages down, the smell of charred grain drifting with the gulls. People begin to whisper of moving inland, abandoning the coast to these sea wolves. That's not a whisper that fades. It becomes migration itself. Britain is reshaping, communities folding inward to escape the horizon. The Angles, Saxons and Jutes don't just raid forever. They settle. A warlord gives them land in exchange for defence, or perhaps they simply take it, planting their spears in soil and daring anyone to uproot them. Their settlements spread like fungi after rain. Timber halls, fenced farmsteads, little clearings in woods where smoke curls skyward. You trudge through one such village, hearing the clatter of weaving looms and the clink of iron being hammered into tools. The smell is wood smoke and pig manure, but also the stubborn aroma of permanence. These people have come to stay. For the native Britons, the newcomers are both threat and puzzle. Their languages are strange, harsh yet oddly musical, their customs unfamiliar. They bring gods of war and sky, feasts of mead, tales of Woden and Thuna. To a farmer who still scratches the sign of the cross into his doorway at night, these deities feel like dangerous guests crashing a sacred dinner party. And yet, there's a grudging fascination. The Saxons are fierce, their poetry bold, their feasts intoxicating. Marriages begin to weave the cultures together. An unwilling daughter wed to a Saxon warrior, or a local chieftain trading his sister for peace. One by one, bonds form, even as axes remain sharp. Still, resistance burns. Some Britons retreat into the hills of Wales, the highlands of the north, or the moors where marshes guard them better than any wall. These hill-fort refuges become bastions of true Britain, where leaders boast of resisting the Saxon tide. Songs are sung of brave men who hold the passes, who guard the old ways, and in these songs a name begins to flicker. Arthur, not yet the Round Table Arthur, not yet the romantic knight in shining plate armour, that's centuries away, but a grimmer, rougher figure. A war leader, perhaps, fighting tooth and nail to keep his homeland from being swallowed whole. You hear his name whispered by firesides, always half legend, half news. Arthur held them at the river, or Arthur broke them in the west. Is he real? In this fog, truth and myth embrace like lovers, inseparable. While Arthur becomes a symbol of defiance, the Saxons and Angles continue to spread. They don't care for Roman towns, they prefer open spaces, fertile fields and river valleys. Roman Londinium, once bustling with merchants, is largely abandoned, left to crumble. Instead, settlements spring up nearby, not on the stone ruins but beside them, as if instinctively shunning the ghosts of empire. In these new villages, houses are sunken featured huts, built half below ground for warmth. Inside, families huddle around central fires, smoke curling through thatch. Their world feels smaller, closer, more intimate than the marble plazas of Rome. Trade, though battered, doesn't die completely. Saxon settlers bring skills in metalworking, crafting intricate brooches and weapon hilts, with spirals and animal motifs. They trade with locals, perhaps grudgingly, perhaps eagerly for cattle, hides or salt. A Romano-British farmer might scowl at the Saxon on his doorstep, but he still takes the iron knife, because survival trumps prejudice. Slowly, inexorably, cultures entangle, not as equals, but as neighbours forced to share the same muddy lanes. But raids never truly stop. Beyond the Saxons, the Picts still descend from the north, painted and fierce. Irish raiders, Scotty, strike from the west, stealing cattle and slaves. Britain feels squeezed on every side, its defences stretched thin. Warlords emerge not by noble lineage, but by who can swing a sword and inspire loyalty. Feasting halls echo with boasts. I held the Saxons at bay. I burned their boats. I broke their shield wall. Whether true or not, these claims weave into reputation, and reputation becomes the currency of survival. You imagine sitting in one of these halls, mead warming your belly, while the chieftain's bard chants of battles you suspect are exaggerated. But no one dares laugh. In this world, belief is a weapon as sharp as iron. Daily life for ordinary people is far humbler. Farmers till fields with wooden ploughs pulled by oxen, their hands blistered, their backs aching. Women spin wool, grind grain on heavy querns, stir pots of barley porridge thickened with whatever greens they can find. Children chase pigs through muddy yards, their laughter one of the few bright sounds in a grim world. Danger may loom on the horizon, but chores never pause. Cows must still be milked, bread must still be baked, roofs must still be patched before the rain. Survival is a drumbeat that never lets you rest, not even when war cries echo in the distance, and yet, even in the chaos, people find moments of strange beauty. Saxon jewellery glints in firelight, delicate interlace patterns carved into bronze. A Romano-British monk scratches letters onto parchment in a lonely cell, the Latin script a fragile thread connecting him to a greater past. A bard sings in a smoky hall, his voice weaving words that carry listeners out of the mud and fear, if only for an evening. You sit listening and realise that even in darkness humans make art, tell stories, dream. It's almost enough to convince you that life is more than survival. Almost. But night always comes, and when it does, the sounds of the sea return. Somewhere out there, more ships are rising. Another group of settlers, another wave of raiders. Britain is no longer the polished jewel of Rome. It's a broken mirror reflecting dozens of faces. Saxon, Angle, Briton, Pict, Irish. Each staring at the same land with hungry eyes. You curl under your cloak, listening to the wind battering the thatch, and wonder which face will rule tomorrow. The fire crackles inside the timber hall, its smoke curling through a hole in the thatched roof like an impatient spirit trying to escape. You step in from the mud, shaking the rain from your cloak, and instantly the smells strike you. Roasting pork turning on a spit, damp wool steaming by the hearth, mead sloshing in cups, and beneath it all the unwashed hang of men who bathe only when rivers demand it. This is the new centre of power in Dark Age Britain. Not a marble forum or basilica, but the smoky, timber-framed hall of a warlord. You glance around. The hall is long, narrow and dim. Carved beams hold up the roof, their ends etched with beast heads glaring down. Shields hang along the walls, bright with painted designs, spirals, boars, dragons, ready to be lifted at a moment's alarm. At the far end sits the chieftain on a raised bench, a man thick with muscle and thicker with pride. His sword leans beside him, its hilt gleaming, a reminder that this is not a politician who debates policy over parchment, but a leader who earns obedience through the sharp edge of iron. The hall is alive with voices. Warriors boast of raids and battles, each story taller than the last. One man claims he split a Saxon's helmet with a single blow, though his dented blade suggests he mostly split logs. Another swears he swam a river in full armour to chase off raiders, though the smirks from his neighbours say otherwise. It's a game of status, this boasting, where exaggeration is currency and laughter greases the deals of loyalty. You realise quickly that survival in this world depends as much on stories as on swords. Food is carried in, platters of meat, loaves of rough bread, bowls of pottage thick with peas and barley. Dogs weave between legs, snapping at bones thrown casually to the floor. You're handed a wooden bowl and a knife. Forks, don't be ridiculous. You stab, scoop and gnaw, hoping not to spill stew down your tunic because laundry is not a daily luxury. Mead flows freely, sweet and heavy, poured into drinking horns that seem impossible to set down without spilling. You drink anyway, because saying no would make you stand out, and in this hall, standing out could be as dangerous as standing in the open during a rain of arrows. The chieftain himself speaks little at first, letting his warriors set the tone, but when he does, silence follows like a well-trained dog. His voice is deep, rough, the voice of a man who has shouted orders over the clash of shield walls. He reminds them of the raids fought last season, praises those who stood firm, hints at rewards for loyalty. Then he shifts, speaking of the danger still lurking, the Picts in the north, the Saxons pressing inland, the treachery of rival Britons who might sell out their neighbours for a sack of silver. Every word is calculated, meant to bind these men tighter to him. Leadership here is not guaranteed by birth alone. It must be reforged constantly in the fire of fear and feasting. At your side, a bard rises with a small harp. His fingers pluck a rhythm as he begins to chant of past glories, the victories of the hall's ancestors, the generosity of lords long dead, the battles where enemies fell like wheat before the sickle. The warriors nod, drunk on memory and mead. The bard is not just entertainment. He is propaganda in human form, reminding everyone that loyalty to this hall is part of a story stretching back into legend. You wonder how much is true, and how much is as inflated as the warrior who claimed to split helmets like melons. But truth matters less than belief, and tonight belief is as thick as the smoke. The hall is also a court of justice, if you can call it that. A farmer is dragged in by his neighbours, accused of stealing a cow. The chieftain listens, brow furrowed, then declares judgment. The thief will repay with 2 cows, or if he cannot, his family will work the Lord's fields until the debt is settled. No lawyers, no appeals, just the chieftain's word. You realise quickly that law in this age is less about fairness and more about keeping order with the efficiency of a cudgel. And if you're wondering how the accused finds 2 cows when he couldn't keep one, well, that's his problem. Outside the hall, the world is harsher still. These men feast tonight, but tomorrow they may be called to defend the village from raiders. The shield wall is the backbone of war in this time, a line of men pressing shoulder to shoulder, shields locked, spears thrust forward. It is brutal, sweaty, claustrophobic. You imagine standing in that line, hearing the enemy's roar grow louder, feeling the ground tremble under charging feet. Your shield shudders as blows rain down, and you realise that the man beside you is not just a neighbour, but your only hope of staying alive. The hall trains men for this, binding them together with food, drink and oaths, so that when the moment comes, they will hold the line instead of fleeing. Women are present too, though their roles are quieter. They serve food, pour mead, tend fires, weave the textiles that keep families clothed. Yet they wield influence in subtler ways. A sharp-tongued wife can sway her husband's alliances. A daughter's marriage can forge peace between rivals, or spark blood feuds if insult is taken. You watch as a woman moves through the hall with quiet authority, her jewellery marking her status. She says nothing to the warriors, but they lower their voices as she passes. Power here wears many disguises. The hall itself is both fragile and enduring. Built of timber, thatch and mud, it could burn to ashes in a single night if an enemy raided. Yet the idea of the hall, the gathering place, the symbol of community, the seat of the Lord, endures. If one hall falls, another is raised, the cycle continuing like the turning of seasons. In the absence of Rome's stone forums, these wooden halls are the heartbeat of Britain. You realise that in this smoky, noisy, slightly terrifying hall lies the blueprint of medieval Europe. The bonds of loyalty forged here will evolve into feudal oaths centuries later. The mead bench will give way to the banquet table, the warlord to the knight, the bard to the chronicler. But for now it is raw, unpolished, half civilized and half savage. As the night deepens, the laughter grows louder, the boasts more absurd. One man claims he fought 3 Saxons with only a cooking spoon. Another insists he wrestled a bear, though his scars look suspiciously like scratches from a cat. The bard rolls his eyes but turns the tales into verse anyway, because exaggeration is the oxygen of this hall. You sip your mead, warm and drowsy, realizing that history is not written in parchment alone. It is born in nights like this, when men drunk on firelight and bravado convince themselves they are larger than life. You step outside into the chill, leaving the hall's noise behind. The stars glitter overhead, sharp as flint, and the wind carries the faint scent of wood smoke across the fields. Behind you, the hall glows like a beacon in the darkness, fragile yet defiant. In that glow you sense the fragile thread holding Britain together, not empire, not Rome, but the stubborn determination of small halls, loud voices, and men who believe their boasts will carry them through another storm. The cock crows long before dawn, though you could argue he's less of a timekeeper and more of a feathered prankster who enjoys interrupting dreams. Either way, the village stirs, and you stir with it. Life in Dark Age Britain is not defined by grand speeches in smoky halls alone. It is carved into the stubborn rhythms of fields, barns and bellies. If the warlord's feast was the theatre of power, the farmer's field is the theatre of survival. And let's just say the seats here are muddy and the ushers are cows that ignore your personal space. You rise from a straw mattress, scratch the fleas from your tunic, yes, everyone has them, don't act surprised, and step out into a dawn mist. The village is a cluster of timber huts, their thatched roofs slick with dew. Smoke curls from hearths, the scent of damp wood mixing with yesterday's stew still clinging to pots. Chickens scatter at your feet, pigs grunt in their pens, and in the distance the oxen snort waiting for the plough. Survival begins with food, and food begins with work. A truth as sharp and unavoidable as the hoe digging into your blistered palms. The fields stretch beyond the village, carved from forest and marsh with relentless labour. Barley and oats are the staples, crops hardy enough to withstand Britain's temper tantrum weather. Wheat exists too, but it's the diva of grains, demanding rich soil and plenty of sunshine, both of which Britain distributes about as generously as a miser guarding his last coin. Still, villagers try, sowing wheat when they can, hoping for enough to bake bread that doesn't taste like a punishment. Farming is a gamble with dice weighted by nature. A dry spring shrivels seeds, a wet one drowns them. Too much frost, and the young shoots die. Too little, and pests swarm like an all-you-can-eat buffet. You, the weary farmer, are always one bad season away from hunger gnawing at your ribs. Famine is not a rare disaster here. It's the constant shadow at the edge of the field. Granaries may be stocked after a good harvest, but rats, mould, or thieves can strip them bare overnight. Imagine working from dawn till dusk, only to watch a winter's supply of grain vanish into the belly of rodents who don't even pay rent. Diet is plain and repetitive. Most meals are some variation of pottage, a thick stew of barley or oats, boiled with whatever vegetables can be coaxed from the soil, leeks, beans, peas, maybe cabbage if the gods are generous. Occasionally you might spice it with herbs, not because you're auditioning for a medieval cooking show, but because flavour is the only distraction from monotony. Bread, dark and heavy, is prized but often gritty with bits of groundstone from the mill. Bite too hard and congratulations, you've invented medieval dentistry. Meat is a luxury. The pigs rooting outside are more valuable alive than on the table, producing piglets and manure. Cows are for milk, oxen for ploughing. Chickens give eggs, sheep provide wool. Animals are rarely slaughtered except for feasts or dire necessity. When meat does appear, pork, mutton, venison, if you're daring enough to poach from a lord's forest, it's salted, smoked, or boiled until it begs for mercy. Fish is common in rivers and coasts, though catching them means competing with otters, herons, and occasionally your neighbour who swears the best fishing hole is his birthright. Foraging supplements, farming. Villagers gather berries, nuts, and mushrooms, though mushrooms are a gamble. One variety feeds you, another kills you, and the difference is the kind of knowledge you really don't want to learn the hard way. Honey is treasured when found, both for sweetness and for making mead. Herbs are grown in garden plots, doubling as both seasoning and medicine. You crouch beside a woman tending her leeks and thyme, and she mutters that each plant has a soul, so you'd better not trample them, or else the gods, or maybe the saints, will make sure your stew burns. Hunger is never far. A bad harvest means cutting portions, mixing bark or ground acorns into flour, chewing leather softened in broth, or, if desperate, boiling weeds pulled from ditches. Children feel it first, their bellies swelling from malnutrition. The elderly feel it next, quietly eating less so the young might live. Famine stories echo in every family. Remember the year we boiled nettles, the winter we ate nothing but turnip peels. These are not legends. They are memories, carved into bone. Work never ends. After sowing comes weeding, then harvest, then threshing and winnowing. Each step is backbreaking, each step vulnerable to failure. You join the harvest. Men swing sickles, women bind sheaves, children chase stray stalks. The sun beats down, sweat stings your eyes, your back feels like it has been stomped by every ox in the shire. But the grain piles grow, and with them, a fragile sense of safety for the coming winter. You don't celebrate, not really, you just sigh with relief, as though you've outrun a wolf for one more day. And wolves are not just metaphors. They prowl at the edges of fields, their eyes glinting from the tree line. At night their howls drift across the village, a chorus that makes every spine tighten. You pile stones against doors, build pens stout enough to hold pigs, keep the fire burning. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you wake to silence and realize the flock is smaller, and your dinner for the next season has slipped into the woods on 4 legs. There's a bitter irony in this world. Feasts for the few, hunger for the many. While the warlord's hall bursts with pork and mead, the peasants outside scrape bowls clean, praying for enough beans to stretch through the week. If the Lord demands food as tribute, you hand it over, even if it leaves your family with thin gruel. Defy him, and his warriors might take not just your grain, but your roof. Hunger is not only nature's cruelty, it is politics sharpened into a weapon. And yet, humour survives. Farmers joke about their own misery because if you don't laugh, you cry, and tears don't fill bowls. This stew tastes like hope, one mutters, chewing on a turnip. Hope that tomorrow I'll find something better. Another swears his wife's bread is so heavy it could double as a weapon in a shield wall. You laugh, because the alternative is despair. Gallows humour is the only seasoning that never runs out. Children adapt with startling resilience. They chase geese, play with sticks carved into swords, mimic the shield wall with pebbles. Their games echo the work of their parents, shaping them for a life where hunger and hard labour are inevitable. And yet their laughter rings clear across the muddy lanes, reminding everyone that joy, however small, refuses to vanish completely. Religion seeps into food and famine too. Priests urge prayers before meals, thanking God for barley porridge as though it were manna. Old pagans mutter charms, burying offerings in fields to coax better harvests. In desperate years, processions carry crosses or sacred relics across farmland, pleading with heaven to turn its face kindly. If the harvest fails anyway, well, perhaps the villagers sinned, or perhaps the gods are simply cruel landlords who enjoy raising the rent. You wander back to the fields at dusk, the sky stained red, the stubble crunching under your feet. A family kneels together, gathering the last sheaves, their shadows long across the soil. Tomorrow, the work begins again, threshing, grinding, storing. Tonight, they sit by the hearth, sip thin ale, and tell each other that maybe, just maybe, this year will be kinder than the last. In a land where famine is always waiting, hope is the most stubborn crop of all. The evening quiet is deceptive. You might think that once the fields are tended and the animals penned, people in Dark Age Britain simply collapse into sleep like stones dropped in a river. But no, after the work comes the weaving, the mending, the endless chores that fill the hours between dusk and dreams. Step into a peasant hut and you'll see it. The flicker of firelight glinting off spindle and thread, the rhythmic grind of a quernstone, the muted gossip of neighbours packed elbow to elbow in a single smoky room. This is the hearthside labour that makes survival possible. The hut itself is simple, wattle walls daubed with mud, a thatched roof sagging in places, a single hearth in the centre. Smoke coils upward, escaping through the thatch as best it can, leaving the air hazy and your lungs permanently flavoured with wood smoke. Furniture is sparse, a few stools, maybe a rough bench, straw mats for beds, yet every inch is alive with work. A woman spins wool, her spindle whirring like a lazy insect. Beside her, another tends a pot of pottage, stirring slowly with one hand while patching a tunic with the other. Efficiency isn't a choice, it's a survival skill. Children hover at the edges, half helping, half getting underfoot. One boy feeds scraps to the pigs tethered outside. Another girl grinds grain with the quern, her small shoulders straining as she pushes the heavy stone. It's exhausting, repetitive, thankless work. Ask her how long she's been grinding and she'll shrug, since forever. Ask when she'll stop and the answer is, when I'm married and then I'll grind in my own hut. It's a generational relay race, each child inheriting the same tasks like a cursed family heirloom no one dares throw away. Textiles dominate the hearthside economy. Wool is spun into yarn, dyed with whatever plants can be boiled into colour, madder for red, woad for blue, onion skins for yellow. These dyes stain fingers and fill the hut with strange smells, part cabbage, part smoke, part something best left unidentified. Looms stand in corners, weaving threads into cloth that will become tunics, cloaks and blankets. Every household is its own textile factory powered by human muscle and patience. And when the cloth is finished, it's not fashion, it's protection, warmth against winters that feel like punishment handed down by a vengeful sky. Leatherwork is another staple. Skins from slaughtered animals are scraped, stretched and tanned. A process that involves so much urine, it makes you reconsider every pair of medieval shoes you've ever admired in a museum. Still, the results are vital. Boots, belts, bags, even crude armour. You can't plough fields barefoot, and you can't carry grain in your hands alone. Leather is civilization stitched together one pungent hide at a time, Metalwork, though rarer, hums in the background. A blacksmith's forge might glow at the edge of the village, where a man hammers iron into nails, knives, or sickles. The sound rings through the night, each strike a reassurance that tools, and by extension survival, are being renewed. Iron is scarce, often recycled from old Roman ruins. A rusting Roman nail becomes a Saxon brooch. A shattered Roman sword becomes a farmer's ploughshare. It's upcycling on a heroic scale, proof that nothing is wasted when resources are tight. Food preparation is another nightly ritual. Grain must be ground, dough kneaded, pot stirred, meat salted. If you think this sounds simple, imagine doing it all with smoke stinging your eyes, fleas biting your ankles, and toddlers attempting to steal scraps from the pot. Pottage, the eternal stew, simmers endlessly, ingredients added and removed over days until the flavour is less recipe and more culinary archaeology. Bread, when baked, is heavy and dark, often laced with grit from the grindstone. One bite can chip a tooth, but it fills the stomach, and that's all that matters. Social life grows out of these labours. Neighbours gather, sharing news, jokes, and rumours as they work. Someone mutters that raiders were seen near the coast. Another swears she heard wolves too close to the pens. Laughter breaks out when a boy accidentally drops a spindle in the fire, and his mother curses with a creativity that could rival any bard. In these moments, the hut feels less like a prison and more like a fragile community stitched together by necessity. The gossip is as important as the work. Information is survival, and stories are currency. Faith, too, seeps into the labour. Crosses are carved into bread before baking, charms whispered over spindles to ward off the evil eye. Some still leave offerings at old pagan sites, a coin buried in the earth, or a jug of milk poured at a standing stone. Others mutter prayers to Christ, hoping he'll keep the wolves from the door and the rain from drowning the barley. The line between superstition and religion is blurry, and most people walk it comfortably. After all, when you're stirring pottage with one hand and spinning wool with the other, who has time to argue theology? Illness is a constant guest in the hut. Smoke inflames lungs, fleas spread disease, food spoils easily. A cough can turn into a death sentence, a cut into infection. Remedies are homegrown, herbs boiled into teas, poultices slapped on wounds, charms tied around necks. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But in a world without doctors, faith in the cure is half the battle, and if the herbs fail, well, at least the bard will have another tragic story to sing. The rhythm of hearthside labour shapes life itself. Morning begins in the fields, evening ends by the fire, and every day is a circle of toil and rest. There are no weekends, no holidays, except those tied to the agricultural calendar. Harvest feasts, sowing festivals, midwinter rites. Work is endless, but it is also communal, a thread binding people to each other as tightly as the wool they spin. Children absorb these rhythms early. A boy learns to carve wood into spoons, to herd pigs, to mend fences. A girl learns to weave, to grind, to stir. The division of labour is sharp, but everyone contributes. Laziness is not just frowned upon, it's dangerous. One idle person can mean one less hide scraped, one less loaf baked, one less chance of surviving winter. You quickly realise that in this world, sloth is not a sin of the soul, but a threat to the community. Yet even in this relentless cycle, there are moments of joy. A new cloak woven in bright red is admired, passed from hand to hand. A loaf of bread bakes just right, its crust crisp instead of stone hard. A neighbour shares honey, golden and sweet, and for a moment the hut is filled with delighted murmurs. These small victories are the stuff of life, the fragile pleasures that make endurance possible. Outside, the night deepens. Wolves howl in the distance. Owls call from the trees. Inside, the fire burns low, casting long shadows on the walls. Work slows, voices soften, and one by one people curl onto straw mats, cloaks pulled tight against the cold. The hut quiets, except for the crackle of the dying fire and the occasional snore loud enough to scare even the wolves. Tomorrow the cycle will begin again, fields, animals, spinning, grinding. The hearth is both cage and refuge, a reminder that survival is not built on glory but on endless, ordinary labour. The night is heavy with mist, and the moon hangs like a pale coin half hidden by drifting clouds. You walk a narrow path between fields, the air damp, the silence broken only by the distant rush of a stream. It feels eerie, as though the land itself holds its breath. In this Britain where Rome has crumbled and Saxon villages rise, faith is no longer a single road, but a tangled forest of paths, some well-trodden, others hidden, all leading in conflicting directions. Here, in the half-light of the Dark Ages, you find yourself at the crossroads of pagan rites and fading Roman Christianity. Imagine stepping into a clearing at night. A circle of stones looms, older than memory, older than Rome, older even than the people who stand there now. Torches sputter in the damp, their flames licking shadows across the rocks. Men and women gather, some with faces painted in ash, some with charms dangling from necks. At the centre, a priest raises his arms to the sky, calling on gods whose names taste of thunder, earth, and blood. Woden, Thuna, Tiw, the old gods of the newcomers from across the sea, or perhaps the older Celtic spirits of grove and river, whose whispers still cling to this soil. Offerings are laid, bread, milk, sometimes a sacrificed animal, its blood seeping into the earth like rent paid to a landlord you never see but always fear. Rituals vary from place to place, a patchwork quilt of belief stitched together from necessity. In the east, Saxons invoke their war gods, asking for victory and good harvests. In the west, Britons cling to Christ, building tiny wooden chapels, the sound of Latin chants echoing faintly against the hills. Yet even there, Christianity is tinged with older practices, crosses carved onto standing stones once sacred to pagans, prayers offered at wells believed to house spirits. Religion in this age is less a battlefield than a tug of war, each side pulling but neither winning cleanly. Festivals punctuate the calendar, blending survival with sacred duty. At midwinter, bonfires blaze, warding off darkness and coaxing back the sun. People leap over flames, laughing nervously as though daring the cold to do its worst. At spring planting, fields are blessed with chants, seeds scattered alongside whispered charms to ensure growth. Harvest brings feasts, not just to celebrate abundance, but to thank whichever god, saint or spirit one happens to believe kept the famine away this year. For most people, faith is not about dogma, but about results. If the ritual keeps the wolves from the sheep, it's worth repeating. Step into a pagan ritual, and you'll smell burning herbs, sage, juniper, sometimes things less identifiable. You'll hear drums, the steady beat echoing like a second heartbeat. Dancers whirl, cloaks flying, hair wild, their movements both chaotic and strangely orderly, like waves in a storm. For a moment, you feel swept up in something vast, something older than language. Then you remember the farmer you saw earlier that day, trudging through mud with a yoke across his shoulders. Faith, you realize, is the only luxury he can afford without coin. And yet, Christianity persists. Monks and priests wander Britain, clutching relics and worn books, building small communities where Latin is still written by candlelight. In isolated valleys, you find monasteries clinging to survival like moss to stone. The monks rise before dawn, chanting psalms in voices hoarse from smoke and cold. They scratch ink across parchment, preserving not only prayers but fragments of knowledge that might otherwise vanish, herbal remedies, bits of Roman lore, even half-forgotten histories. To the locals, these men are both strange and necessary. They heal the sick with prayers and herbs, baptize babies, bury the dead. Their god may feel foreign, but his servants are useful, and usefulness earns respect. Conflict simmers between the two faiths. A pagan warlord may scoff at the cross, yet still allow a priest to bless his fields just in case. A Christian farmer may secretly bury offerings at a sacred grove, while still attending Mass on Sundays. The line between belief and superstition is blurry, and most people walk it comfortably. For them, it's not betrayal to hedge bets, it's common sense. After all, when famine or raiders come, you want every god, saint and spirit on your side. Superstitions are woven into daily life. Amulets carved from bone are tied to children's necks to ward off evil. Charms of iron are nailed above doorways. Herbs are hung in bundles to repel witches, or neighbours accused of being witches, which is often the same thing. Wells are both water sources and sacred sites, their depths whispered to house spirits who can bless or curse. You toss a coin in for luck, not because you're sure it works, but because you'd rather not risk finding out it does. Funerals reveal the diversity of belief most starkly. Pagans bury their dead with goods, weapons, jewellery, food for the journey beyond. Christians bury theirs in simple graves, marked with crosses, emphasizing humility and faith. Yet even Christian graves sometimes contain trinkets, a quiet nod to older traditions. Imagine walking through a burial ground. One grave marked with a cross, another with a spear laid across the body, another with a brooch still gleaming on the chest. The dead lie side by side, their beliefs mingling as their bones crumble into the same soil. For the elite, religion is also politics. A warlord might convert to Christianity to secure alliances with neighbouring Christian rulers, or remain pagan to prove independence. Conversion is rarely just personal, it's strategic. A baptized leader can claim legitimacy. Drawing on the authority of bishops, a pagan leader can present himself as strong, untamed, loyal to the gods of battle. Faith is both a weapon and a shield in the hands of those who know how to wield it. The clash of faiths breeds stories. Christians tell of saints who stood against pagans, miracles that toppled idols, angels who defended the faithful from raiders. Pagans tell of gods who smote enemies, spirits who guided hunters, omens written in the flight of birds. Both sides tell of wonders, both claim truth, and the people in the middle nod along, unwilling to risk angering either. Truth is less important than survival, and survival means pleasing everyone, heaven and earth alike. You sit by a fire one night, listening to an old man chant a story of how Aurthur split the sky with his hammer, driving away frost giants so spring could come. His eyes gleam, his voice rises with thunder, and the children gasp, wide-eyed. Then the local priest clears his throat and begins a tale of Christ feeding the 5,000 with bread and fish. The children gasp again, though one whispers that Christ sounds a lot like a very clever farmer. Both stories linger in the smoke, blending into the night. Even as faith divides, it also unites. Festivals bring communities together, whether pagan or Christian. Fires are lit, songs are sung, ale flows, and for a few precious hours, the hunger, the raiders, the endless labour are forgotten. You dance, awkwardly perhaps, but swept up in the rhythm, and realise that whether they pray to Woden or Christ, people are bound by the same need, to feel that life is not just toil and fear, but part of something larger, something sacred. By dawn the mist lifts. The fields stretch before you, damp and waiting. A woman walks past with a basket of herbs, muttering a prayer to both the Virgin and the Spirit of the Well. A boy chases a pig, shouting a curse that sounds suspiciously like an invocation of Woden. A monk bends over parchment, his quill scratching in Latin, and somewhere a warlord sharpens his sword, deciding whether his oaths today will be sworn by the cross or by the hammer. In this land, faith is not a clear choice. It is a constant negotiation, a dance between old and new, earth and heaven, fear and hope. You walk on, the echoes of chants and drums fading behind you, and you realise that Britain in the Dark Ages is not godless at all. It is overflowing with gods, saints, spirits, and stories, each competing for a place in the hearts of people who simply want to make it through another winter. The morning fog lifts slowly, revealing a village nestled in the folds of a green valley. Smoke curls from low thatched roofs, sheep wander the pastures, and the distant clatter of wooden wheels carries across the air. This is the world most people of Dark Age Britain know, not the halls of kings or the battlefields of warlords, but the intimate circle of huts, fields, gossip, and chores that define village life. You step into the muddy lane and realise that here survival is less about glory and more about sheer stubborn repetition. The huts are small, usually one-room structures built from timber frames, woven wattle walls daubed with clay, and roofs of thatch so thick it droops like a sleepy eyelid. Inside, the space is crowded. A central hearth smokes perpetually. Straw bedding is piled against the walls, tools lean in corners, and animals sometimes share the room in winter for warmth. The smell is unforgettable, a mix of smoke, dung, sweat, and stew that clings to clothes like gossip clings to ears. To modern noses it may seem unbearable, but for villagers it is simply the scent of life. Step outside and the lane is alive with motion. Women fetch water from a nearby stream or well, balancing wooden buckets on yokes across their shoulders. Children chase geese, their shrieks mixing with the honking. A man repairs a cartwheel, cursing at the wood as though swearing might coax it into place. Every sound, every action is part of the shared rhythm that turns survival into something almost musical. though admittedly more out-of-tune bagpipes than symphony orchestra work shapes the village day. At dawn, men drive oxen to plough fields, their shouts carrying across furrows. Women spin wool or flax into thread, their fingers moving with weary precision. Children help by collecting firewood, scaring birds from crops, or grinding grain with hand querns. Each task is small, but together they keep the village turning like a great wooden wheel, creaking, imperfect, but stubbornly rolling forward. Crops are communal. Though each family tends its own plot, the fields themselves are often divided into strips worked by different households. Cooperation is necessary. Sowing, harvesting, and threshing are done collectively, with neighbours helping neighbours. To shirk work is to risk famine, and no one forgets a slacker. Reputation is currency, and laziness is the kind of debt that cannot be repaid. Whispered insults follow those who avoid chores. His ox always limps when it's time to plough, or her back aches only when the quern needs turning. In a world this fragile, gossip polices behaviour as efficiently as any sword. Speaking of gossip, it's the lifeblood of the village. Information spreads faster than smoke in a gale. Who stole firewood, who courted whose daughter, who whispered a charm at the well, all are noted, exaggerated, and repeated. Gather at the well and you'll hear more news than at any council. A woman mutters that raiders were sighted on the coast. A man swears his cousin saw a saint walking near the marsh. A boy brags that his father caught 3 fish with his bare hands. Translation: 1 fish, bought from a neighbour. Gossip is entertainment, warning system, and social glue all at once. You listen carefully, because in a world without written records, rumour often stands in for truth. Village justice is swift and personal. If a chicken goes missing, suspicion flares instantly, and the accused may find themselves hauled before the local reeve or chieftain. Punishments vary. Fines paid in livestock, forced labour, or public shaming. Stocks and pillories aren't yet common, but humiliation is. A thief might be forced to parade with the stolen goods tied around his neck, jeered by neighbours until the lesson sinks in deeper than any lecture. Violence too lurks close. Feuds over land or insult can flare into bloody fights, resolved only when one family yields or the chieftain imposes peace. Law is less about fairness and more about balance, keeping the village from tearing itself apart over stolen geese. Religion threads through village life in subtle ways. A wooden cross may stand at the lane's edge, decorated with garlands at spring festivals. Wells are blessed with prayers, though some still whisper to the old spirits beneath the water. A monk might visit occasionally, preaching in Latin no one understands, but villagers nod anyway, eager for blessings that might guard crops from blight. When sickness spreads, charms are hung above doors, sprigs of herbs, bits of iron, words scratched into wood. Faith here is practical, like a tool, used when needed, set aside when not. Leisure, such as it is, sneaks into the cracks of work. Children invent games with sticks and stones, mimicking warriors in play battles. Adults gather for storytelling in the evenings, when bards or elders recount tales of heroes, saints, and tricksters. Music is made with pipes, drums, and voices, echoing across the fields in a rough harmony. Awe, weak but plentiful, loosens tongues and fuels laughter. Feasts are rare but treasured, marking weddings, harvests, or victories. On those nights, the village glows with firelight. Bellies are full, and even the hardest lives feel momentarily softened. Yet danger always presses close. Wild animals raid livestock. Wolves prowl the edges of the forest, their howls piercing the night. Raiders may strike without warning, burning huts and stealing cattle. Even neighbours can be threats when hunger gnaws too deeply. The village survives not by walls alone, but by vigilance, watching skies for omens, forests for movement, and each other for betrayal. Safety is never guaranteed, only borrowed one night at a time. Seasonality dominates the rhythm of the year. Spring is sowing, summer is tending, autumn is harvest, winter is survival. Winter nights are the hardest. Food stores dwindle, sickness spreads in cramped huts, and the cold gnaws at bones. Families huddle by the fire, counting each day until the sun grows stronger. Stories and songs become lifelines, weaving warmth where the hearth alone cannot. A single good harvest is celebrated like a miracle, because everyone knows how fragile the balance truly is. Women's roles are vast, though often invisible to outsiders. They tend gardens, spin wool, bake bread, raise children, brew ale, and keep households running. Their work is relentless, but without it, villages would collapse. A woman's skill at managing stores, preserving food, and healing with herbs can mean the difference between life and death in winter. Their influence may be quiet, but it is constant, woven into the fabric of daily life like thread in a cloak. Children learn early that work is life. By the time they can walk, they help chase geese or fetch kindling. By adolescence, they are full participants. Boys guiding ploughs, girls spinning wool, both helping at harvest. Education is not letters and numbers, but skills, the kind that keep a family fed. If a child shows curiosity, an elder might teach them charms, songs, or herbal lore. Knowledge passes hand to hand, never written, but memorized like a sacred inheritance. Forgetting is unthinkable. Forgetting can kill. Community is both burden and blessing. Villagers depend on each other utterly, sharing tools, exchanging labour, watching one another's children. At the same time, they monitor each other with hawk-like suspicion. Privacy is non-existent. Secrets are rare. You know who had an argument last night, who hoarded barley, who muttered a suspicious charm. The village is less a neighbourhood and more a hive, buzzing with shared labour and shared judgment. It is claustrophobic, but it is also the only shield against the chaos beyond. And then there are festivals, the rare days when labour pauses and joy bursts through like sunlight after storm. May Day brings garlands, dancing, and games. Harvest feasts overflow with bread, ale, and roasted meat if the year has been kind. Marriages turn into communal celebrations, binding families with oaths and drunken singing. These festivals are more than fun. They are reminders that life is not just toil and fear, but also laughter, love, and shared delight. They are the glue that holds weary hearts together when winter threatens to break them. As dusk falls, you stand again in the muddy lane. Smoke drifts lazily upward. Children tumble in play. Dogs bark at shadows, and the smell of supper stews carries on the breeze. The village is small, fragile, exposed, but it endures. Its strength is not in stone walls or iron swords, but in the stubborn persistence of ordinary people repeating ordinary tasks day after day, season after season. This, more than the boasts of warlords or the dreams of kings, is what sustains Britain through the dark. The wind sharpens as you walk north, and the land grows harsher. Hills rise like jagged teeth, forests thicken, and the air smells of peat and salt. Here, beyond the quiet rhythm of village fields, danger presses close. It is not just hunger or wolves that haunt the edges of life in Dark Age Britain, it is the ever-present threat of raids. The horizon itself is a source of fear, for from it may come painted warriors from the north, nimble raiders from the west, or longboats cutting through the eastern waves. To live here is to live with the knowledge that your hut, your cattle, your very family can be stolen in the time it takes to light a torch. Begin with the Picts. To the north, beyond Hadrian's crumbling wall, their lands stretch across rugged highlands and misted glens. Roman writers once described them as tattooed barbarians, their bodies painted in spirals and beasts, their hair wild, their courage unbroken. In truth, they were a confederation of tribes, fierce and mobile, expert in skirmish and ambush. When Roman order vanished, nothing kept them from pressing south. They came swiftly like wolves over the border, their raids leaving smoke and panic in their wake. To a farmer in the north, the word Pict was not history, it was nightmare. Imagine waking at dawn to find your neighbour's hut burned, his cattle gone, his children vanished into the mist. The Picts fought not for glory but for plunder, and they fought with a ferocity that left survivors whispering prayers to every god they knew. From the west came the Irish, known then as the Scotti, crossing the narrow sea in hide-covered boats. Their raids struck the coasts of Wales and Cornwall, stealing cattle, slaves, and anything of value. They carried captives back across the sea, where a boy might grow into a bondsman or a girl into a concubine. Tales spread of children snatched while gathering shellfish, of monks dragged from lonely chapels, of fires glowing on the horizon where a village once stood. The Irish raids planted seeds that would later grow into kingdoms, for some raiders stayed, carving out settlements in western Britain. But in the Dark Age moment, all that mattered was the terror of boats sliding ashore at dawn, oars dripping, warriors leaping with spears in hand, and from the east came the Saxons themselves. They had arrived first as mercenaries, hired by desperate Britons to fight the Picts and Irish. But mercenaries are loyal only to coin, and when the payments stopped, or when they realised Britain's soil was rich enough to claim for themselves, they turned from allies to invaders. Their ships dotted the horizon like teeth, their shallow keels allowing them to slip into rivers and strike deep inland. A quiet morning could be shattered by the scream of horns, the crash of shields, the sudden roar of men pouring through lanes. Entire villages vanished in a single day, their huts blackened, their people slain or enslaved. Raids were more than violence, they were trauma etched into the rhythm of life. A child in a northern hamlet grew up with stories of how grandmother hid in a ditch while the Picts burned the house. A farmer in Cornwall remembered the year raiders carried off half the cattle and left the rest dead in the field. The fear was not abstract. It was woven into bedtime stories, warnings, even jokes. "Eat your stew," a mother might whisper, "or the Picts will take it." Dark humour was the only way to mask the deeper dread. Defences were crude but determined. Villages built stockades of timber, ditches and banks dug around the edges, gates barred at night. Watchmen stood on hills, scanning horizons for sails or smoke. Fires were lit on beacons to warn neighbouring settlements, the flames leaping from ridge to ridge like a desperate signal chain. Weapons were kept close, spears leaning by doors, bows hung from rafters, axes sharpened not only for wood but for war. Men drilled in shield walls, awkward perhaps, but knowing that when the time came their lives depended on standing shoulder to shoulder, and yet raids always found cracks. A foggy night when the watchman slept, a weak gate left unbarred, a shepherd lured too far from the village. These were openings, and raiders exploited them mercilessly. No defence was perfect, and the cost of failure was ruin. Survivors of a raid often faced famine, their grain burned, their livestock gone. Worse still, they faced grief, watching loved ones dragged away, knowing they might never see them again. Slavery was not an abstract threat. It was a constant reality, the grim fate of thousands carried off in raids to foreign shores. Religion intertwined with fear. When raiders struck, villagers blamed sins, neglect of rituals, anger of saints or spirits. Priests led processions, carrying relics around fields for protection. Pagans left offerings at sacred groves, pleading for divine shields against enemies. Every raid was both a military event and a spiritual crisis, a reminder that survival depended on both spears and prayers. Stories of raids became legend. Bards sang of warriors who held a gate until dawn, of women who fought with kitchen knives, of villages that rose from ashes stronger than before. These stories comforted, teaching that even in loss, bravery had meaning. But behind the songs lay truth. For every hero's tale, countless nameless villagers fell, their courage unnoticed, their suffering swallowed by silence. The raids also reshaped Britain itself. Communities abandoned coasts, retreating inland to safer valleys. Some merged with stronger neighbours for protection, swelling small villages into larger fortified sites. Warlords gained power by promising defence, their halls filling with men eager for safety under a strong hand. Violence created both ruin and order, forging the alliances and rivalries that would define Britain's future kingdoms. Imagine one such raid. Dawn breaks, pink lights spilling across the sea. A fisherman sees shadows on the horizon, too many for harmless trade boats. He runs, shouting as sails rise, black against the sun. The alarm bell clangs, families scramble, warriors snatch shields. But the boats are swift. Raiders pour ashore, their cries echoing like thunder. Huts burn, cattle scatter, villagers fight or flee. By noon the beach is littered with broken spears, smoke smears the sky, and the boats are gone, taking with them livestock, grain, and weeping captives. The survivors stand stunned amid ashes, and the only choice is to rebuild, because to give up is to die. This cycle of raid and rebuild defined generations. Children born after a raid grew up hearing, "This is why we build stronger fences, why we train harder, why we keep watch." Trauma became tradition, vigilance passed like inheritance. Villages became sharper, harder, less trusting of strangers. Hospitality remained, but always with an edge, because who knew if the traveller by the fire was friend or spy? And yet, life continued. Fields were sown again, huts rebuilt, cattle replaced. Humanity's greatest stubbornness is the refusal to stop. Even after the worst raids, laughter returned eventually. People told jokes about raiders who slipped in mud or drowned chasing pigs. They turned fear into stories, because stories were a shield as much as spears were. You sit by a fire one night, listening to an elder describe how she once smacked a Pict with a broom and sent him running. The younger villagers laugh, not because it's entirely true, but because they need to believe courage works. As twilight falls, you stand on a hilltop. To the north lies the land of Picts, to the west the Irish coasts, to the east the Saxon shores. All are threats, all are neighbours, all are part of Britain's new reality. Below you the village lights flicker, fragile against the dark. You realise that this land is shaped not by peace, but by resilience. The ability to endure raid after raid, to lose and rebuild, to weep and then laugh again. The darkness presses close, but the fires still burn, stubborn as the people who light them. The markets of Rome are gone, but the memory of them lingers like the echo of a song. Once upon a time, ships unloaded amphorae of wine, olive oil, and garum onto bustling docks, while merchants shouted prices across crowded forums. Coins clinked, contracts were signed, and Britain was tied to the wide Mediterranean world by a web of trade as fine as a spider's silk. But in the Dark Age years, that web has torn, and the silk now lies tangled and half-rotten. To walk through a village market now is to see not marble stalls or exotic wares, but a muddle of barter, gossip and desperation. Imagine stepping into a muddy square on market day. There are no grand buildings, only a trampled patch of earth between huts, with a few makeshift stalls built from timber. People arrive from neighbouring hamlets, leading oxen, carrying baskets, or dragging carts that creak like they're on their final wheels. The air is thick with smells, smoke from roasting meat, sweat from bodies pressed together, the sour tang of ale, the sharp bite of hides curing in the sun. Chickens squawk, pigs squeal, dogs snap at scraps. Voices rise in a cacophony, offers, insults, gossip disguised as business. Coins are rare here. The Romans left, and with them the minting of money collapsed. Some old coins still circulate, but they are valued less for purchasing and more for weight of silver or gold. A battered Roman denarius might pass from hand to hand as a keepsake, a pendant, or even an amulet. A farmer laughs as he shows you one. Worth more nailed above the door than in the purse. Keeps thieves away, or so my grandmother swore. Without reliable currency, barter rules the day. You see it everywhere. A woman offers a sack of barley for a clay pot. A shepherd trades wool for salt. A fisherman swaps a basket of eels for an iron knife. Value is negotiated, not fixed. One day a sheep might be worth 3 cloaks, another day only 1, depending on hunger, weather or whim. Haggling is half the fun or half the misery, depending on which side you stand. Voices rise, hands gesture wildly, neighbours squabble like crows over crumbs. Eventually someone spits into their palm, the other does the same, and the deal is sealed with a sticky handshake no amount of soap, if soap even existed, can cleanse. Exotic goods are scarce, but their presence electrifies the market. A trader from the coast displays beads of bright glass, shimmering blues and greens that seem almost magical against the mud. Children gape, adults whisper, and one woman clutches her chest as though the sight alone might summon envy from the gods. Another trader unwraps a piece of silk thin as spiderweb, shimmering in the light. Few can afford it, but everyone stares. These rarities travel along fragile routes from Gaul, even as far as Byzantium, carried by brave, or foolish, merchants who risk pirates, storms and bandits. To own such an object is not just wealth, it is status, proof that you are tethered, however faintly, to the vanished glory of Rome. Salt is the lifeblood of trade. Without it, meat rots, fish spoils, and winter becomes a death sentence. Traders carry blocks of it inland from coasts, their packs heavy, their steps slow. Villagers eye them greedily, offering wool, hides, or even labour in exchange. Salt is not just food, it is survival crystallized. To give salt is to give life. No wonder it is guarded fiercely, sometimes more than gold. Livestock dominate the market's noise. Sheep bleat, goats tug at ropes, pigs squeal indignantly, as though offended by their own existence. Each animal is wealth on 4 legs: meat, milk, wool, leather, and status. A man might boast that his herd is larger than his neighbour's army, and in some ways he's not wrong. To steal a cow is to wound a family's fortune. To lose a herd is to court starvation. At market, animals are examined like treasure. Teeth checked, hides prodded, hooves inspected. A bad trade here can ruin a household for years. But the market is more than economics. It's social theatre. People come as much to talk as to trade. News spreads faster here than in fields or halls. A monk passing through shares rumours of saints working miracles in the west. A farmer whispers of Saxon raiders spotted near the coast. A woman mutters that the harvest will fail because she saw crows circling at dawn. Whether true or false, these stories ripple outward, shaping fears and hopes. The market is a primitive internet. Every rumour a post, every whisper a thread. Justice sometimes plays out here too. A thief caught stealing might be punished in front of the crowd, forced to return goods, pay fines, or endure humiliation. The public nature of the market makes it a stage for law, as well as trade. A chieftain's reeve might stand tall, declaring judgments while villagers nod or grumble. The message is clear. The market belongs not only to buyers and sellers, but to power itself. And then there are entertainers. A bard strums a harp, singing of heroes long dead. Children clap, adults listen half distracted, but the melody lingers. A juggler tosses stones, pretending they are golden apples, his jokes sly, his grin cheeky. A storyteller recounts raids, battles, and miracles, embellishing freely. These performers earn food, coins, or even just applause, reminding everyone that even in a world of hunger, laughter still sells. Yet beneath the noise and colour, scarcity hums like a dull drumbeat. You notice how thin some faces are, how eagerly children lick bowls of stew, how hands clutch food with nervous tightness. The market is a place of possibility, but also of reminder. There is never enough. Every trade is shadowed by fear that winter will strip away what little was gained, that raiders will seize goods before they reach home, that the gods themselves will sour the crops. The market is less celebration than survival performed in public. Trade shapes identity. A fisherman who barters with inland farmers brings not just fish, but stories of the sea. A wool trader returns from distant coasts with tales of strange people, strange tongues. These exchanges stitch villages together, turning isolation into fragile networks. Britain may no longer be part of Rome, but threads of connection remain, frayed but unbroken. Each market is a reminder that no village is an island, no matter how surrounded by fields or fear. At the end of the day, the market dissolves. Traders pack up, villagers herd animals home, the muddy square empties. Only scraps remain. Spilled grain, gnawed bones, a broken pot. Dogs nose through the debris, crows swoop down, and silence returns. But tomorrow, or next week, the market will stir again, because survival demands it. To eat, to clothe, to endure. People must gather, must barter, must risk. You walk away as dusk falls, the sounds fading into memory. The Roman coins are gone, the marble forums silent, but the heartbeat of trade still pulses, rough and irregular, like a drum made from stretched hide. It is not the empire's economy of wine and luxury, but it is enough. Britain's markets may be small, muddy, and quarrelsome, but in their noise and barter lies resilience, the stubborn refusal to let hunger win. The village lane is quiet now, the market noise long faded, but inside the huts, voices hum with a different sort of rhythm. It is the rhythm of women's lives, steady and relentless, shaping the world in ways so constant they are often invisible. In Dark Age Britain, the stories of warlords and raiders loom large, yet beneath them flows another current, quieter but no less vital. The daily labour, struggles, and rare triumphs of women. From queens crowned with circlets to milkmaids bent over buckets, women carry the burdens of this fractured land, and though their power is limited, their influence stretches far beyond hearth and spindle. Begin with the queens and noblewomen. In the halls of warlords, where smoke and feasting dominate, women move at the edges but never entirely outside of power. A queen may not stride into battle, but she can shape alliances through marriage, dowries, and whispered counsel. A noblewoman pours mead at a feast, her gesture both hospitality and diplomacy. She smiles at one guest, frowns at another, and in doing so signals who holds favour. Marriage itself is less romance and more strategy. A daughter is given to a rival lord to seal peace, or taken by force to prove dominance. Her body becomes treaty parchment, her children the ink binding two houses. It is a harsh truth. For noble women, power is both gift and cage, inherited not through the sword but through the cradle. Yet queens can wield authority in their own right. Consider a hall where the warlord lies wounded from battle. His wife steps forward, not merely as caretaker, but as regent, commanding warriors, negotiating with rivals, ensuring the hall does not collapse into chaos. Her words carry weight because lineage matters. She is the mother of heirs, the keeper of continuity. Some women even gain reputations as fierce rulers, remembered in stories for their cunning or ruthlessness. These tales remind you that while the shield wall may belong to men, the politics of survival often runs through women's hands. Step down from the hall to the village, and the scope of women's work expands further. A peasant woman rises before dawn, stirs the embers of the fire, and begins a day that will not end until long after nightfall. She bakes bread, her hands kneading dough gritty with flour ground from hand querns. She tends the garden, pulling weeds, harvesting leeks, beans, and herbs. She milks the cow, feeds the pigs, gathers eggs from chickens who peck her ankles in protest. She weaves wool, spins thread, patches tunics, scrubs children, and somehow finds time to stir the eternal pot of pottage bubbling over the fire. Her labour is invisible only to those who never survive without it. Childbearing dominates much of her life. Women marry young, often in their teens, and pregnancies follow quickly. Childbirth is dangerous, attended by other women armed with herbs, prayers, and experience, but no real medicine. Many mothers die, many infants too. Those who survive bear scars, physical, emotional, spiritual. Yet they continue, because in this world, children are wealth. Sons help in the fields, daughters spin and weave, both carry lineage forward. A woman's status is tied not to her beauty but to her fertility, though beauty still matters enough for songs to praise golden hair or bright eyes, even if the singer neglects to mention the missing teeth from years of poor diet. But women are not only mothers and workers, they are healers too. Knowledge of herbs passes from mother to daughter, a tradition as old as the hills. Yarrow for wounds, chamomile for fevers, garlic for infections, honey for sores. Some remedies work, others only comfort, but in a world without physicians, such knowledge is as precious as gold. A woman might be called to tend the sick of her village, her reputation growing with each life saved. Sometimes her skill earns respect, other times suspicion, for healing can look too much like sorcery. A whisper of witch is never far, though in truth, most so-called witches are simply women who know more than their neighbours. Faith binds women tightly. Some embrace Christianity, attending chapels, crossing themselves, praying for safe births and good harvests. Others cling to older ways, leaving offerings at wells or whispering charms into the soil. Women keep these rituals alive because they are closest to the fragile edge of life, where birth and death meet. A husband may swing a sword, but it is his wife who prays over the cradle, who lays coins on the eyes of the dead, who ensures that the unseen world is honoured. In this sense, women are the keepers of continuity between gods, saints, and spirits. Socially, their lives are policed as tightly as their labour. Chastity before marriage is guarded fiercely, for a woman's value lies in her dowry and her fertility, both compromised by scandal. Adultery is punished harshly, often more severely for women than men. A husband's infidelity may be shrugged at with weary resignation. A wife's can spark blood feuds. Yet affairs still happen, whispered in shadows, sung in bawdy songs that pretend to be jokes while everyone knows they're half-truths. Women walk a narrow path where reputation is both shield and sword. Even within constraint, women find power. Gossip is their weapon, sharper than any blade. A whispered rumour at the well can shape reputations, sway marriages, even topple alliances. A clever woman knows how to wield words, weaving them into nets that catch both enemies and friends. This influence is subtle but potent, operating in spaces men often overlook. If the hall is a battlefield of spears, the hearth is a battlefield of tongues, and victories there can last generations. Some women break expectations entirely. Warrior women appear in stories, real or exaggerated, leading raids, avenging wrongs, fighting beside brothers. Scholars debate how common they truly were, but the very existence of such tales suggests possibility. More often, Women step into power as widows or mothers of young heirs, ruling by necessity rather than choice. In those moments, the fiction of male-only authority shatters, revealing that survival sometimes requires bending rules. Slavery adds another layer. Raids bring captives, many of them women. They are forced into households as labourers, concubines, or worse. Their lives are harsh, their choices limited, yet even they shape the communities they are dragged into. Some eventually marry into households, their children absorbed into local lineages. Others vanish into silence, their stories untold, their existence a reminder of how fragile freedom is in this age. Through it all, humour persists. Women joke about their husband's laziness, about bread so hard it could kill a man in his sleep, about children who seem to eat more than cows. These jokes, passed in whispers at the well or muttered over spinning wheels, are a release valve, a way to laugh at burdens too heavy to carry otherwise. You overhear one woman mutter, "My husband says he's the head of the household." True enough. A head, after all, is nothing without a neck to hold it up. Her neighbour chuckles and the laughter spreads, small but defiant. As night deepens, you sit by a fire where women finish their endless tasks. One patches a cloak, another braids her daughter's hair, another stirs the pot. Their faces are lined, their hands rough, but their eyes gleam with resilience. Outside, wolves may howl, raiders may loom, famine may threaten, but inside, life endures because of their labour. You realise that while kings and warriors fill chronicles, it is women who fill the silence between wars, who keep the hearth burning, who ensure that tomorrow even exists. The night air grows heavy, and in the flicker of firelight you notice the lines carved deep into every face around you. They are not only from age or labour, but from sickness. Lingering coughs, scars from boils, eyes clouded by fevers survived but not forgotten. In Dark Age Britain, disease is an enemy as relentless as raiders or famine. You might fear Saxon longboats or Pictish spears, but it is the unseen forces that strike without warning, slipping through huts and villages like invisible thieves, stealing breath, sight, and strength. To live here is to live with illness as a constant companion. Begin with the obvious killers, fevers, coughs, and fluxes. In cramped, smoky huts, lungs fill with soot, coughs never quite heal. A cold can become pneumonia, a cough consumption, and what might seem a minor ailment in your modern world is here a gamble with death. Stomach illnesses sweep through villages too, spread by bad water or spoiled food. Children waste away, their bellies swollen, their eyes too large for their faces. Adults stagger on, weakened, yet still forced to labour, because hunger waits for no recovery. Skin diseases mark many bodies. Boils, rashes and ulcers are common. Their causes mysterious to those who suffer. Some blame spirits, others curses, others still the anger of saints. When a sore refuses to heal, fear grows. Will it spread to the whole body? Will it rot the flesh? Leprosy, when it appears, terrifies. Its wasting marks not just sickness, but stigma. Victims are sometimes shunned, forced to the edges of communities, their existence a living warning of divine punishment. Childbirth is another battlefield of disease. Women risk fevers, hemorrhage, infections. Midwives work with herbs and whispered prayers, but even their skill cannot always turn the tide. A fever after childbirth is dreaded. Childbed fever claims lives swiftly. Graves of young mothers, their infants sometimes buried with them, are common. In a world where every life is precarious, these losses still cut deep, the grief carried in silence as others continue their own cycles of survival. Injuries, too, are perilous. A cut from a sickle, a burn from the hearth, a broken bone from a fall, all can turn deadly without proper healing. Wounds fester, pus and rot setting in, while the victim grows feverish. Without true surgical knowledge, treatment relies on cleaning with wine, honey or herbs, and on faith that the body, or the divine, will intervene. Sometimes it works, often it does not. You see scars everywhere, proof of survival, but also the shadows of those who did not heal. Remedies are as varied as the land itself. Herbs form the foundation. Yarrow for bleeding, willow bark for pain, nettles for strength, fennel for stomachs. Honey is prized for its healing, spread on wounds to prevent rot. Garlic is eaten for vigour, onions rubbed on skin, mint boiled into teas. These plants are the pharmacies of the Dark Age, their recipes passed from elder to apprentice, from mother to daughter. Some work, Modern science would even approve, while others are little more than hope in green leaves. Charms and rituals intertwine with medicine. Words are whispered over wounds, crosses traced in the air, amulets tied to wrists. An illness may be treated with herbs by day and with prayers by night. A fevered child might be bathed in water blessed by a priest, then laid beneath an oak tree said to hold healing power. To separate medicine from magic is impossible. For these people, both are part of the same survival. After all, if you are dying, you will grasp at any rope, whether woven of faith or science. Leeches make their appearance too, clinging to flesh in hopes of balancing humours. Bloodletting, inherited from Roman practice, persists in crude forms. A cut to let out bad blood is common, though it often weakens more than it heals. Still, belief is powerful. When a fever breaks afterward, by coincidence or chance, the treatment is praised as miraculous. Failure, of course, is blamed not on the method but on the will of the gods. Plagues sweep through with terrifying speed. Smallpox scars faces, leaving survivors pitted and blinded. Influenza kills swiftly, sparing neither child nor elder. Tales tell of whole villages struck, bodies piled for burial, fields left untended. These epidemics are remembered for generations, their scars etched not only on bodies but on stories. A grandmother mutters, "That was the year half the cattle died and half the people too." To live past such a plague is to carry memory like a wound. The church plays its role in healing. Monks cultivate herb gardens, their cloisters filled with sage, rue and lavender. They write remedies in Latin manuscripts, blending Roman knowledge with local traditions. Pilgrims flock to holy wells and shrines, seeking cures from saints' relics. A crippled man might drag himself to a chapel said to cure lameness, while a mother dips her sick child in a sacred spring. Some recover by chance or faith, and the place's reputation grows. Others die, but their families say at least they tried. Faith, even when it fails, gives meaning to suffering. Superstition thrives where knowledge falters. A fever might be blamed on a curse cast by an envious neighbour. A wasting disease might be said to come from an elf-shot arrow, invisible but lethal. To cure it, charms are tied to the body. Bits of iron, carved runes, teeth of animals. Some smear ashes on skin, others pass children through smoke, believing evil will be burned away. In desperation, people accept any cure, for death is always near. The social weight of disease is heavy. The sick may be cared for by family, but fear always lurks. Will it spread? A man coughing blood may find himself isolated, not out of cruelty but survival. Villages cannot afford to risk all for one. The tension between compassion and necessity tears at hearts, but hunger and fear are ruthless teachers, and yet resilience shines. A child recovers from a fever, weak but alive, and the village celebrates as though a battle was won. A wound heals clean, and thanks are given to both herbs and saints. A woman survives childbirth, her baby thriving, and neighbours gather to offer gifts. Every survival is a victory, every cure a triumph, however small. In this world, health is never taken for granted. It is treasured, precarious, fragile as glass. Jokes soften the fear. Someone coughs too loudly, and a neighbour quips, "That's just your soul trying to escape early." A man with scars boasts that women find him irresistible because he looks too ugly for death to want. Gallows humour, yes, but necessary. When disease surrounds you, laughter is the only shield thin enough to carry without breaking your back. As you sit by the fire, listening to villagers murmur about remedies and charms, you realise that medicine here is less about conquering disease than about enduring it. Herbs ease, charms comfort, prayers console, but death always hovers. And yet people endure because they must. Tomorrow the fields need sowing, the cattle need tending, the children need feeding. Illness may strike, but life goes on, and that, perhaps, is the greatest medicine of all. The hearth burns low, and outside the wind rattles the shutters. After the day's labour, after the endless tending of fields and the fearful watching for raiders, villagers gather in the dim glow of firelight. It is here, in these smoky halls and huts, that stories take on their true power. In Dark Age Britain, words are not mere entertainment. They are memory, history, comfort, and weapon all at once. When parchment is rare and ink scarcer still, it is the storyteller, not the scribe, who keeps the past alive. Imagine sitting cross-legged on a straw-strewn floor, your belly warmed by thin ale and your ears straining toward a bard plucking a harp. His voice rises and falls, weaving rhythm into the silence. Around you, children lean against their mothers, warriors rest heavy-headed from drink, elders close their eyes as if to summon the ghosts of their own youth. The story begins slowly, deliberately, the bard's voice hushed at first. Then it grows louder, painting images in your mind as vivid as torchlight on stone. Bards, skalds, and wandering singers are prized guests. Their craft is memory itself. They know hundreds of verses by heart, sagas of battles, genealogies of kings, tales of gods and saints. Each story is a woven cloak of words, keeping listeners warm against the chill of forgetting. A warrior may fight with spear and shield, but a bard fights with language, ensuring that no victory or defeat vanishes with the smoke of the hearth. To forget is to die a second death, and so the bard is both entertainer and guardian of immortality. Stories serve many purposes. Some recount the deeds of ancestors. Your grandfather fought at the river, where the Saxons broke and fled. Others explain the world's mysteries, why the sun rises, why the wolf howls, why storms rage. Some are simple warnings, tales of greedy men who hoarded grain and starved, of women who betrayed oaths and were cursed. Morality, history, and myth blur until each tale carries lessons, wrapped in exaggeration, but rooted in survival. The style is dramatic. A bard does not simply tell, he performs. His voice shifts into growls for warriors, whispers for spirits, cries for widows. He stamps his foot, slaps his knee, plucks the harp strings with sudden violence to mimic the clash of swords. Children squeal, adults cheer, and for a moment the room is transformed into battlefield, forest, or chapel. When the tale ends, silence lingers, heavy and reverent, before applause erupts in the form of clapping, shouts, or another round of ale for the bard. Not all storytellers are professionals. Elders pass tales to grandchildren, spinning yarns while spinning wool. Mothers murmur stories to children at night, comforting them against the howls of wolves. Farmers gossip in fields, turning news into legend by sheer repetition. In this way, stories seep into every crevice of life. They are the glue holding memory together in a land where books are rare luxuries. The subjects of stories range from heroic to absurd. Some are about Arthur, the shadowy war leader who may or may not have existed, but who certainly lives in imagination. Others recount saints wandering Britain, working miracles, a spring gushing from a stone, a blind man healed by touch, a starving village fed by a single loaf. There are trickster tales too, foxes outwitting hunters, fools stumbling into fortune, neighbours mocked for laziness or greed. Humour mixes with reverence, because laughter is as necessary as awe. Genealogy is another vital thread. Bards recite long chains of ancestry. This man, son of that man, son of that man before him. It may sound dull, but it anchors people in time, proving claims to land or leadership. A warlord who cannot trace his bloodline may struggle for loyalty. A farmer who remembers his ancestors' deeds finds pride in his plough. Lineage is not vanity, it is identity, and stories are the ropes binding the living to the dead. Stories also travel. Wandering bards move between villages carrying news and legends from afar. One night you hear of battles in the north, the next of miracles in the west. These stories spread faster than armies, shaping how people imagine lands they will never see. Exaggeration is inevitable, but it matters less than the feeling conveyed. A raid described as monstrous, a king praised as generous, a saint proclaimed as holy. Such tales shape reality as much as they reflect it. And yet storytelling is not just lofty heritage, it is survival. In long winters, when hunger gnaws and sickness spreads, stories distract from despair. Children huddle close, listening to a tale of a hero who endured worse and triumphed. Adults nod, reassured that their suffering is part of a larger pattern, a story bigger than themselves. To be told, others survived, is to believe that you too might. Stories are medicine for the mind, easing the fever of fear. Superstition threads through stories like gold in cloth. Ghost tales abound. The farmer who angered a spirit and was cursed, the warrior who heard voices in the mist, the woman who walked after death to reclaim her dowry. Spirits of wells, forests and stones appear often, demanding respect. These tales are warnings disguised as entertainment, teaching children not to wander too far, teaching adults not to break oaths, reminding everyone that the unseen world is always watching. Bards are rewarded handsomely, at least by village standards. A good performance earns bread, ale, maybe even a cloak. In noble halls, a bard may be showered with gifts, brooches, rings, a place of honour near the fire. To host a bard is to gain prestige, proof that your hall is worth singing of. A warlord's reputation can rise or fall depending on how a bard spins his deeds. Words are weapons sharper than swords, and bards are their smiths. But storytelling is not safe. Say too much, and you risk offence. Mock the wrong family and you may find yourself thrown out. Or worse. Praise a rival too loudly, and suspicion follows. A bard must balance truth with flattery, humour with caution. In this way, stories are political tools, shaping alliances and rivalries. Even gossip, that low form of storytelling, can ruin reputations or spark feuds. Words once spoken cannot be unspoken, and in a world without paper they linger longer than ink. Women too are storytellers. Around hearths, they weave tales of saints, warnings about witches and lullabies that carry fragments of ancient myth. Their stories may not echo in halls, but they echo in children's minds, shaping generations. In their voices the everyday becomes sacred. A bread loaf blessed, a cow's stubbornness turned into parable, a neighbour's kindness exalted into legend. These small stories build community as surely as grand sagas. Laughter is constant. Jokes about lazy farmers, greedy lords, or unlucky hunters bring relief. A bard may pause mid-saga to mock a snoring warrior drawing chuckles. A woman might quip that her husband's bravery in battle is matched only by his cowardice in milking cows. Humour stitches community together, allowing people to laugh at hardship without denying it. In the darkest nights, laughter is as precious as firewood. As you sit longer, the room grows warmer with the cadence of tales. A child falls asleep on your shoulder, dreaming perhaps of heroes or saints. The bard's heart plucks one last note, the fire hisses, and silence falls. In that silence you realise these stories are more than entertainment. They are the backbone of identity. When Rome collapsed, its books and records faded, but memory survived in mouths and ears, carried like a flame through generations. Without storytellers there is no history. Without history there is no Britain at all. You step outside. The night sky is vast, the stars cold. Behind you the hall glows, voices still murmuring within. Somewhere across valleys and seas armies march and kingdoms rise. But here, in this small corner of the world, it is words that hold people together. Stories, fragile as breath yet stronger than stone, weave the dark into something survivable. And tomorrow, when work begins again, the people will carry those words with them, like torches against the endless night. The seasons keep turning, as they always do, and little by little the endless churn of warlords, raids and famine begins to settle. It is not sudden, not like a bell ringing, but more like the slow growth of moss on a stone. Gradual, almost invisible until you step back and realise the whole landscape has changed. In Dark Age Britain, what had been a patchwork of scattered villages, burning raids, and whispered legends begins to harden into something new. Kingdoms, law, and the faint outlines of order. This is not the Rome that was lost, nor the full-blown medieval world to come, but a transitional place, half shadow, half dawn. At first, the change is simple survival. Villages band together, deciding that unity is stronger than isolation. A chieftain who once ruled a single valley extends his influence to 3, then 5, demanding oaths from neighbours in exchange for protection. Feasts grow larger, oaths louder, halls stronger. A man who once called himself a warlord now dares to call himself a king. The word carries weight, even if his crown is nothing more than a circlet of bronze hammered together by a local smith. Kingship is not about jewels or palaces. It is about convincing enough people to kneel and enough warriors to fight. These early kingdoms are fragile, shifting like sandbanks. Borders are not lines on a map, but zones of influence, changing whenever a stronger army arrives. A river may belong to one king in spring, another in autumn. Villages pledge loyalty to whoever promises grain or safety, then quietly switch allegiance when that promise fails. Treachery is not betrayal here. It is pragmatism, the only way to survive when the ground beneath you is always trembling. And yet, through the chaos, something new emerges. Law. Not Roman decrees written in neat Latin, but spoken codes passed from mouth to ear. Kings declare rules, theft punished by fines of livestock, blood feuds settled by payments instead of endless revenge. These laws are rough, unequal, and often cruel, but they are steps toward stability. People begin to believe that disputes can be solved without endless cycles of killing. That belief alone is revolutionary. Christianity plays its role too. As priests and monks spread across the land, they bring not only prayers but literacy. Small churches rise from timber and stone, their bells marking time in ways no village had known before. A child baptized is more than a soul saved. It is a symbol that this family belongs to a larger community. Kings adopt Christianity to strengthen their authority, aligning themselves with the power of the church. To kneel at an altar is to gain legitimacy, to cloak ambition in holiness. And for ordinary people, Christianity offers something just as important. Hope that suffering is not meaningless, that beyond famine and disease lies eternal reward. At monasteries, monks scratch ink across parchment, preserving fragments of Roman knowledge and new chronicles of kings. These manuscripts are not common, they are treasures, but their existence marks a turning point. Knowledge, once at risk of vanishing entirely, begins to trickle back. Children in villages may never see a book, but they hear rumours of them, and those rumours carry weight. Literacy becomes power, and those who wield it, priests, monks, scribes, gain influence beyond their numbers. Trade also stirs back to life, though in humbler form than in Rome's heyday. Markets swell, rivers carry goods, and coasts hum with cautious exchange. Salt, wool, hides, and timber are the staples, but slowly precious goods return. Beads, silver, even wine. Each foreign object feels miraculous, a reminder that Britain is not entirely cut off from the world. A woman who wears a bright glass bead is not just adorned, she is marked as connected to faraway places, as if the bead itself carries whispers from Gaul or Byzantium. Architecture changes too. Halls grow larger, fortified not just with timber but with earthworks and ditches. Villages cluster tighter, surrounded by palisades. In some places, stone begins to rise again, not the grand villas of Rome, but churches, strong and square, their walls defiant against weather and time. To see stone rise from the earth is to feel permanence returning, a sign that the world may not always collapse into ashes. Of course, peace is never complete. Raids still come, rival kings still clash, famine still stalks winters. But the scale begins to shift. Battles are not only skirmishes in valleys, they are contests for territory, for kingdoms themselves. Names of rulers echo across regions, not just villages. Ella of Sussex, Ida of Bernicia, Cerdic of Wessex. These names mark the birth of entities that will one day become nations. In their boasts, in their feasts, in their wars, the foundations of England itself are being laid. For ordinary people, daily life remains harsh. Fields must still be sown, pottage still stirred, children still buried in tiny graves. Yet there is a subtle difference. A farmer now owes taxes to a king instead of endless tribute to wandering warlords. A woman brings her child to a church instead of a sacred grove. A trader carries salt not only to the next village but across entire regions, confident in the protection of a king's peace. Fragile though it is, order allows people to breathe a little easier. Stories reflect the change. Bards no longer sing only of nameless heroes but of kings whose deeds spread across Britain. Arthur's shadow grows longer, his battles sung in detail, his victories woven into a myth of unity against chaos. Whether he lived or not matters less than what he symbolizes. The dream of a Britain not torn apart by endless raiding, but bound by loyalty to something greater. His legend becomes a lantern carried from hall to hall, reminding listeners that order is possible, that greatness can exist even in dark times. Humour survives too, because how else can people endure? Farmers joke that kings tax cows faster than calves can be born. Women laugh that priests preach against ale while drinking more than anyone. Even kings are mocked. Quietly, of course. One tale tells of a ruler who tried to sit on the seashore and command the tide to halt, only to end up drenched. Whether the story is true or not, it spreads like wildfire, because it scratches the itch of every villager who's ever cursed their lord. Laughter, as always, is rebellion in miniature. The land itself reflects the shift from darkness to dawn. Forests still encroach, but clearings expand. Roads, though broken, see more traffic. Rivers carry boats not just for raiding, but for trade. Fields stretch wider, dotted with sheep, whose wool will one day fuel entire economies. The horizon feels less like a threat and more like a promise. Britain is not yet safe, not yet whole, but it is no longer entirely adrift. As you walk through this landscape, you feel the weight of transition. Behind you lie ruins of Rome, crumbling villas and abandoned baths. Around you stand timber halls, smoky and rough. Ahead, faint outlines of stone churches and stronger kingdoms. It is a liminal world, neither ancient nor medieval, but a bridge between. For those who live it, it may feel chaotic. For you, looking back, it is the birth of something new, and yet the people themselves remain constant. They sow, reap, laugh, mourn, feast and pray. Kings rise and fall, but the hum of village life endures, stubborn as weeds in a ruined forum. You realise that the dawn of a new age is not made by kings alone, but by every farmer who tills soil, every woman who spins wool, every bard who remembers names. The future is written not only in chronicles, but in smoke and sweat, in gossip and lullabies. So you stand at the edge of a field as the sun sets, the sky glowing gold. Children chase each other with sticks, pretending to be warriors. A monk scratches lines into parchment by candlelight. A king sharpens his sword, dreaming of conquest, and you see it clearly. Out of the so-called darkness, something brighter is stirring, fragile but undeniable. Britain is not just surviving anymore, it is becoming. The night is soft now, the sky above Britain stretched wide with stars, their silver light falling over fields, rivers and quiet villages. You walk slowly along a dirt path, the air damp with the scent of wood smoke and earth. The day's clamour of labour, gossip and fear has dimmed, leaving only the hush of crickets and the faint rustle of leaves. This is the moment to reflect, to let the noise of kings and raiders, saints and storytellers settle into silence. For in the end, life in Dark Age Britain is not just battle cries or feasts or hunger. It is also the stillness of night, the resilience of ordinary people, and the comfort of a fire that refuses to die. Think of all you have seen across this long wandering. You have walked through Roman ruins, their stones scavenged and their mosaics cracked, yet still haunted by memory. You have seen Saxon settlers carving villages into the land, their halls smoky but strong. You have trudged through muddy fields where barley and oats cling stubbornly to life, and sat inside huts where women spin wool by the faint glow of embers. You have felt the terror of raids, the grief of disease, the sharp pang of famine, and you have heard the bards sing, their voices lifting warriors and farmers alike into worlds of myth and meaning. And yet, through all of it, there has been continuity. However fragile, however battered, Britain did not vanish. It reshaped itself, piece by piece, through the hands of countless nameless people who endured. Their resilience is the thread stitching the tapestry of history, less glamorous than kings, less loud than battles, but more enduring than both. Now, in this final stretch, you feel the dawn creeping slowly forward. Kings rise, churches grow, laws take root, trade flickers back. The chaos of collapse gives way to the murmur of order, not perfect, not stable, but enough to breathe. The so-called Dark Age is not pure darkness at all. It is twilight, with light always waiting on the horizon. As you stand in the hush of this imagined Britain, the sensory world softens. The torchlight of a hall flickers in the distance, its glow warm against the dark. Somewhere, a mother hushes her child with a lullaby that blends scraps of pagan charm and Christian prayer. A farmer finishes his ale, sets down his wooden cup, and stretches sore muscles before lying on straw. A monk scratches the last letter of a psalm before blowing out his candle. Wolves howl faintly on the hills, but their voices are far away, muffled by the night. Life continues, quietly, steadily, like the slow heartbeat of the earth. And here, at the close of our journey, the pace itself slows. Words drift like smoke, sentences lengthen, the rhythm gentles. You feel your own breath deepen, your shoulders ease, your eyes heavy. The chaos of raids and the roar of feasts fade into a hum of distant memory, replaced by the calm of quiet paths and whispered prayers. Britain, like you, is learning to rest. So let the images fade one by one. The mosaic floors crumble into wildflowers. The warlord's hall melts into shadows. The monk's quill pauses, its ink drying on the page. The village hearth glows, then dims, then quiets. Only the stars remain, steady and eternal, watching over land and people alike. And you, dear listener, let yourself drift with them. The darkness is not frightening anymore. It is soft, protective, gentle. Just as those who lived through these times found comfort in stories, you can find comfort in this story's close. You're not alone, you are part of the same long thread, the same enduring resilience that carried them through. Rest now. The journey is complete. The hall is quiet, the fields are safe for tonight, and the fire burns low. Tomorrow will bring its own labours, its own fears and joys, but for now, you are safe in the hush of history. Close your eyes, let the weight of the world slip away, and sink into the deep, steady calm of sleep.